In 2025, China stunned the world by posting a record $1.2 trillion trade surplus, the largest in history. This figure didn't just break records, it shattered expectations and sent shockwaves through global markets, leaving analysts and policymakers scrambling to understand how China pulled it off. Despite new U.S. tariffs as high as 145%, China's exports didn't just survive, they soared. Many predicted a sharp decline, but instead, Chinese goods continued to flow out of ports at an unprecedented pace, defying the odds and rewriting the rules of global trade. Instead of shrinking, China's surplus jumped from $993 billion in 2024, with December alone hitting $114 billion. Month after month, export numbers climbed, surprising even the most optimistic forecasters and signaling a new era for Chinese trade. This wasn't luck. China rapidly shifted strategy, redirecting exports to new markets and reconfiguring supply chains. By forging new trade partnerships and investing in logistics, China ensured its products reached buyers across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The US aimed to isolate China, but the result exposed the limits of unilateral tariffs in a globalized world. Other nations stepped in to fill the gap, eager to benefit from China's manufacturing strength and competitive pricing. The real surprise: the nature of China's exports changed. No longer just cheap goods, but high-value products like electric vehicles, batteries, and solar panels led the surge. These advanced technologies became the new face of Chinese exports, capturing global demand. China's economic identity transformed from low-cost factory to high-tech powerhouse. Investments in research, automation, and innovation paid off, allowing China to compete at the cutting edge of global industry. The $1.2 trillion surplus wasn't just a number, it was a declaration of China's new global status. It signaled a shift in economic power and a bold statement of intent to the rest of the world. This achievement forced the world to rethink China's role in the global economy. Countries everywhere began reassessing their own trade strategies and partnerships in response to China's rise. China's adaptability and strategic pivot left policymakers everywhere scrambling for answers. The world watched closely, trying to decipher the next moves of this economic giant. The world had underestimated China's resilience and ambition. Now, with its unprecedented trade surplus, China had firmly established itself as a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. Donald Trump's dramatic return to the White House in 2025 sent shockwaves through global markets and political circles alike. Almost immediately, his administration imposed a sweeping new wave of tariffs on Chinese goods, with some rates soaring as high as 145%. The move was intended to protect American industries and force China to the negotiating table. As a result, direct Chinese exports to the US plummeted by 20%, and the once massive bilateral trade surplus shrank noticeably. On paper, the tariffs seemed to be working, delivering a short-term win for the administration and its supporters. But beneath the surface, a far more complex story was quietly unfolding across the globe. While US-China trade slowed, China rapidly opened new markets in Africa, Europe, and beyond, offsetting its losses and forging fresh economic alliances. The US had assumed China was deeply dependent on its market, a critical miscalculation that underestimated Beijing's adaptability. Instead, the tariffs became a powerful catalyst, pushing China to diversify and strengthen its global trade network at an unprecedented pace. Ironically, the very policy meant to weaken China's export machine only made it more resilient, innovative, and ultimately more powerful on the world stage. As a result, the world's trade map was being redrawn before our eyes, with new alliances and routes shaping the future of global commerce. China's response was swift and strategic, a global pivot dubbed the Great Reallocation. Exports to Africa surged 26%, with electric cars and solar panels leading the way. Southeast Asia's imports from China jumped 13%, cementing China as Asia's economic anchor. Even Europe and Latin America increased their imports, despite concerns about trade imbalances. China became indispensable to diverse markets, offering products tailored to local needs. By diversifying partners, China insulated itself from US pressure and built a more robust export economy. Trade flows found new paths, and China turned them into major commercial arteries. China didn't just find new markets, it found new routes into the US. Chinese firms shifted final assembly to countries like Mexico and Vietnam, exploiting free trade agreements. Goods entered the US with lower tariffs, even if most components were Chinese. This tariff engineering made official data misleading. Imports from Mexico and Vietnam soared, but Chinese content remained high. The modern supply chain blurred national lines, making targeted tariffs nearly impossible to enforce. China's adaptability exposed the holes in America's tariff wall. The globalized economy proved too complex for simple trade barriers. The real story of 2025 was the transformation of China's exports. High-value products, electric vehicles, batteries, and solar panels became the new face of Chinese trade. Years of investment in R&D paid off, with Chinese EVs and clean energy tech dominating global markets. China's export sophistication grew, from precision machinery to advanced AI chatbots. Moving up the value chain made China less vulnerable to tariffs and low-wage competition. This was a deliberate national strategy, central to China's vision of technological leadership. The record surplus was not just about quantity, but a statement of China's new economic power. The world now faced a formidable high-tech competitor. China's massive trade surplus sent shockwaves through the global economy, triggering widespread anxiety and a swift backlash from many countries. European leaders loudly decried the relentless flood of Chinese imports, warning that their own industries and jobs were at risk of being wiped out by cheaper goods. The IMF stepped in, cautioning that China's aggressive export-led growth model could destabilize the global economy and fuel dangerous trade tensions between major powers. Many economists argued that China was exporting its own economic challenges, especially weak domestic demand, onto the rest of the world, straining global supply chains and hurting foreign businesses. Back home, China's once booming property market had cooled dramatically, and consumer spending continued to lag behind expectations, raising concerns about long-term growth. Instead of pivoting to boost domestic consumption, Beijing doubled down on its export strategy, pushing factories to ramp up production for overseas markets. The trade surplus now accounted for over 10% of China's GDP, underscoring just how dependent the country had become on foreign demand to drive its economy. While China's strategy delivered record profits and economic gains, it also set the stage for a new era of global trade disputes and rising geopolitical tensions. The world economy now stood on a knife's edge, with investors and governments everywhere anxiously watching to see what China would do next.